David actually deved games? Yep, you heard that right. A few weeks ago, I participated in the 2025 GMTK Game Jam. I hadn't really done one of these in a long time, so I figured what better way to get back into game dev than to try to make an entire game in 4 days. I think that's all the intro you need, really. Before the theme was announced, I made sure to set up a stream beforehand, not only to capture my live reaction to the theme, but also so chat could help me come up with ideas. Alright. Yeah. We're just gonna wait here for 6 more minutes. And then I prepared a little Google Doc. It took so much preparation, you see. But yeah. Yeah, you know what? We'll play 5 minutes of Balatro. Okay, the stream might be a little laggy. That's okay. We Balatro. That's a lot. It's so loud. Why is it so loud?
Welcome to GMTK Game Jam 2025.
Let's go.
This is a loop.
One word. Loop. After the theme was revealed, I began brainstorming ideas with my oh-so-helpful chat. I feel like I need one more danger. Should I do turrets? I am not adding Jeffrey Epstein as a danger to my game. And roughly 40 minutes of brainstorming later, I came up with this. A 3D platformer where you must loop through variations of the same room to win. In these variations, there would be different tiles. I eventually settled on the name artifacts. And these artifacts would have different uses depending on what they are. For example, a build artifact could allow you to make a previously impossible jump actually possible, or it could even lead you to another artifact that you would need to complete the level. So with this in mind, I booted up a new Unity project and began development. I immediately began by setting up a test scene and watching a tutorial on how to make a first-person controller, as for some reason, a first-person controller is something that I have never learned how to make on my own in all of my years of game dev. Anyway, after I set that up, I began making a simple little test room for my player using this neon grid art style. The reason I went with the neon grid art style rather than something else is, well, one, because I'm lazy, but the main reason is so I could easily change the colors of the rooms whenever you loop. Okay, I might be a tad lazy. Anyway, now that this room is set up, I then started working on a tile indicator. Should I have really been spending so much time working on a tile indicator when I have 4 days to make this game? No, probably not. Did I do it anyway? So I stole some code from the internet. I needed a way to get the face of a cube that the raycast hits, so that way the tile indicator always stays on the cube and not inside of it. Now, around this time was when I unfortunately started getting a lot of problems with my code. Yeah, 2 hours in and my code's already buggy. For starters, the tile indicator was not snapping to the correct position whatsoever. I won't go into the details of the code because that's boring, but due to the way it was rounding it to snap to a 2x2 grid, it would sometimes either just skip a multiple of 2 or even just snap to an odd number. Another problem was, jumping sends you forwards? Like, what? Hello? Why am I going forward? Why do my jumps send me forward? And also the player's velocity was just completely different based on where you're facing. So yeah, pretty buggy. I first got to work on the tile indicator using my revolutionary coding skills to shrink the room. Yeah, I just shrunk the room and hey, now it lines up, would you look at that? Once all that was over, I spent the rest of the day making the base of what would later become the level rooms. Next day rolls around and I began by finishing up the base of the level room. I also added a quick little check to make sure the tile indicator is not overlapping with the player, and once that was done, I actually made the loop part of the level room. You know, the one thing I need to actually convey the theme? Yeah, that thing. Yeah, I made that, and while it does have a slight jump whenever you teleport to the other side, I'd say it's still pretty good. Now that all of this is working well, the next thing I need is to actually add the artifacts to the game, because if you can just build all the way to the finish line in a platformer, it's not really much of a platformer, is it? I made this little UI box in A-Sprite, then used that to make the sprites for the first 2 artifacts, the build artifact, and the removal artifact. Once that was done, I imported everything into Unity, and honestly, this UI is starting to look pretty nice. I also added a little slider to show how many uses your artifact has left. Unfortunately, around this time is when things started to take a turn for the worst. Whenever the player held 1 artifact, everything worked great. But whenever you picked up 2, or 3, or even 4, stuff really started to break. There'd be artifacts that have no uses left but are still in the inventory, or ones that are infinite somehow. It just felt like no matter how much I tried to fix one problem, 2 new ones would just suddenly emerge. I spent the rest of day 2 trying to fix that, and by the end of the day it was still so buggy. I felt like although a rework might be needed, reworking something like this would take way too much time, and I should just move on and try my best to ignore it. I mean, if I deleted over 300 lines of code and reworked everything to make it less buggy, that would take up way too much time. So I reworked the UI. Yeah, it turns out it was a very simple fix, and it cut the amount of code down by like 90%. Well, since that fix was so much easier than I expected, I began working on the rest of the artifacts I had planned for this game. I made the removal artifact, which just removes cubes placed by the player, or ones keeping a secret. The bouncy artifact, I'm sure, is pretty self-explanatory. And lastly, the sticky artifact. Yes, this is one of the most complex animations I've ever made in my entire game dev career. No, I am not sorry. I then spent literally the entire rest of day 3 fixing the rotation of the bouncy and sticky artifacts. This means that tomorrow I have to make all of the levels, all of the audio, and here we go. Well, final day. I immediately began today with the level design since, you know, having an actual playable game is pretty important. Level design took a bit longer than I had originally expected, but once that was done, I began working on the main menu for the game. I decided to call this game Looper because I am one of the most creative people when it comes to naming my games. I also made this simple little logo, and honestly, for being made in less than 5 minutes, I'd say it's pretty good. Now that that's out of the way, it was time for the audio. Simultaneously one of my most favorite and least favorite parts about making games. Now, if you didn't already know, I'm not really the best at making audio, especially the music. But honestly, this simple little music loop I made isn't actually that bad in my opinion. Oh well, I'm sure you all give me plenty of kind, encouraging, heartwarming comments on this music. I implemented all of the sounds, and at 11 PM, the night before the jam ended, I finally submitted my game. You know, for 4 days, I am actually really proud of how this game turned out. I mean, sure, you can skip every single level by flying using the options menu. I don't know how I didn't catch that. But I mean, it's still pretty good. Ratings came in a few days later, and my game placed, drumroll please, 2,000. Yeah, I was hoping for a bit higher, but hey, 2,000th place in a game jam with nearly 10,000 submissions, I'd say is pretty good. Well, now that the game jam's over, it looks like I finally get to set this game aside and return back to working on my gaming videos. What was that? Oh, right, yeah. I'm turning this game into a full-fledged release on Steam wishlist now. Okay, bye!